By any objective measure, the Pentagon under Pete Hegseth's leadership is an unprecedented train wreck. I won't repeat all the egregious acts that have been shared multiple times over in this hearing, but I will say this: none of this is normal. None of this is right. Every new revelation exposes yet another instance of shocking and gross incompetence from the Secretary of Defense, and each time we do nothing but reward him with more money, we are complicit. And while Pete Hegseth scours the Pentagons for leakers, hoping that each new day doesn't yield yet another horrible news story because he's clearly trying to fake it till he makes it, the American people are right there with him because it's their friends and families, their livelihoods, our national security on the line. Nothing we have seen in the past 3 months leads me to believe that this Secretary of Defense has the leadership and managerial skills, the judgment, or the executive temperament to run the Pentagon. Worse, he is normalizing a dangerous culture of practice where retribution, security breaches, firing, and attrition through intimidation is both commonplace and acceptable. It's fair to say that the mistakes he has made on the job more than justify his immediate dismissal, because our service members and their families deserve better. The President of the United States deserves better. Our nation deserves better than what Pete Hegseth has offered us so far. If President Trump refuses to hold his own Secretary of Defense accountable, even as his administration purchased thousands of federal employees who do have the skills, the judgment, and the temperament to do their jobs, then clearly Congress must step in. This amendment is simple and necessary. Secretary Hegseth clearly doesn't know how to do his job. We need to make him get his act together by putting him and his entire Senate-confirmed leadership team through a managerial and supervisory training program that makes clear what's right and what's wrong. This is not a radical idea, nor is this any kind of harsh punishment. Millions of Americans every day go through similar trainings on a regular basis. Employees who are not delivering on their job, unable to do their job, are often put on performance improvement plans and tasked with completing these kinds of trainings so they can actually get the job done. This amendment is also about fiscal responsibility. We should not be giving anyone the authority to spend an additional $150 billion on top of the over $850 billion in DOD's discretionary budget with as little oversight and accountability as my Republican colleagues are proposing today. Least of all, someone who has proven to be so incapable of serving as Secretary of Defense right now. If Republicans are going to give Secretary Hegseth this sort of virtually unchecked spending authority, a blank check paid for by taxpayers, taken literally from food money and Medicaid, then we should all demand oversight in who wields these funds. And we have to make sure he does his job in a way that does not compromise our national security. No matter what party is in charge, we all want and should demand a Secretary of Defense that will succeed and keep us safe. When they do, our nation is stronger and we are safer. While I will continue to have significant disagreements with this administration and their national security policy, I and countless millions of Americans need, deserve, demand to know that our Secretary of Defense is willing to admit when they've made a mistake or exhibited a severe lack of judgment and is willing to accept corrective action and guidance on how to do their job right. To vote no is to be both complicit and approving of the gross incompetence of the Secretary and is a danger to this country's national security, promoting a culture of chaos that they are establishing right now at the Pentagon. To vote no is to accept responsibility and to be culpable for Pete Hegseth's behavior as is unchecked. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment and to vote yes. President Trump has been in office for less than 100 days, but his administration has already unleashed numerous assaults on our food security in Hawaii and in rural communities nationwide. The cuts to SNAP and work requirements proposed and imposed by this administration and congressional Republicans will result in families losing food off their tables, and too many children will go hungry. When it comes to rural America, here are the facts. 1.7 million rural Americans live in counties where there aren't enough jobs for people who need them. 63% of rural counties have fewer jobs than before the Great Recession. In addition to this, challenges like lack of affordable housing, childcare, and access to transportation all make it harder for rural Americans to find and sustain employment. Dr. Schazenbach, you've stated that expanding work requirements would cause harm. Would you specifically, briefly discuss how these proposals would specifically impact rural communities?
Yeah, so in general, rural communities rely a little bit more on SNAP, in large part because of the reasons that you mentioned, declining, work base, et cetera. But SNAP works really effectively in those areas, in part because it, works through normal channels of trade. And so, you can go to the grocery store with your benefits, with your other money together. It helps prop up the rural economies. It helps, again, back to that multiplier effect, when you're spending money in the rural areas, that keeps more jobs in the area as well. SNAP is very important for rural households.
Thank you. So to lift up our rural residents and our rural economy, and to put it bluntly, for many rural Americans, Republicans' efforts to raise work requirements is essentially sentencing them to starvation because of where they happen to live. Across the country, millions of Americans are frustrated with the high cost of living, especially with the price of their groceries. Rural communities are absolutely no exception. The difference is that SNAP participation rates are higher, as you mentioned, in rural areas. The fact that the places producing the food that we consume as a nation experience even higher rates of food insecurity is not just a cruel irony. It is a fundamental inequity in our country's food system, one that SNAP helps to address, both by putting food on their tables and by supporting farmers and rural economies. Yet rolling back the 2021 Thrifty Food Plan update means SNAP benefits would fail to cover the cost of meals in every county across the country, not even close to supplemental, especially in rural communities. According to the Urban Institute, maximum SNAP benefits for a rural resident in Leelanau County in Michigan would be almost $3 short of the average cost of a modestly priced meal of $5.19. That's a shocking 133% gap, the second highest for any county in the country if Republicans roll back the 2021 TFP update. Tito, Blaine, Camas, and Custer counties in Idaho, Lincoln and Teton counties in Wyoming, and Nevada and Sierra counties in California would all see over a 110% gap between SNAP benefits and the cost of a moderately priced meal in those areas. Pierce County, Wisconsin would see a 91% gap, and in Dodge County, Minnesota, an 87% gap. The list goes on, but the bottom line is this: rural communities will not survive these SNAP cuts. Rural Americans will starve. It's worse if you account for the fact that every SNAP dollar spent in a rural area in this country generates $1.79 in local economic activity. USDA's own analysis highlighted that an additional $1 billion in SNAP spending raised GDP by $1.54 billion, created over 13,000 jobs, and generated over $32 million in farm revenue. Feeding people feeds our economy, and it supports our farmers, ranchers, and producers. If we let Republicans cut SNAP, we're letting them take billions of dollars away from these rural communities. Less market demand means less farm revenue, resulting in less jobs at the end of the day. Dr. Schazenbach, what will happen to rural communities and towns across our country and every one of our districts here if people can't find jobs where they live, and due to cost and scarcity, they can't afford to feed themselves and their families?
Yeah, so it will make people worse off, and it will make the economy worse off, which then has a spiral effect. I do want to say we're not going to let people starve. The charitable food sector, is already stretched very thin, but we are still the United States of America. We're not going to let people starve, but
the charitable food sector can only go so much.
That's
Clearly,
correct.
This is where we need to supplement and make sure people do not starve. Let's be clear, in my district, people will leave these communities. We will all see an exodus of our constituents if they cannot afford to work and to feed their families. Thank you, Dr. Schazenbach. I yield back. Every one of us on this committee knows food is not just a commodity. It is survival, it is dignity, it is community, it is hope. We are here because we believe in investing in rural America, in food security, and in giving every single American, no matter their zip code, a fair shot at the American dream. And yet, here we are, debating a bill that turns its back on those very principles. This bill doesn't just trim around the edges, it guts SNAP, one of the most effective anti-hunger, anti-poverty programs we have. SNAP puts food on the tables for working families, children, seniors, veterans, and persons with disabilities. It supports local economies, yes, including farmers, ranchers, and rural grocers who rely on that spending to stay afloat. So let's call this what it is: a cruel, calculated choice, a false choice that takes food away from hungry families on a larger scale than ever before in our history, all to give more tax breaks to billionaires. That's not good policy. That's abandonment. And let's be clear, this choice is not just morally indefensible, it is a betrayal of the oath we took to uphold the Constitution. Article 1 charges us to promote the general welfare, not the interests of a privileged few. This choice is not just wrong, it violates the most basic promises of our democracy. We were not sent here to serve the wealthy. We were sent here to serve everyone. Just last week, I stood at the Maui Food Bank. I saw pallets of rice, cans of vegetables, boxes ready to be handed to neighbors in need. Before the pandemic, they served 13,000 people a month. Today, 42,000. 40% of them are children. That's nearly the entire population of a small town lining up regularly for basic sustenance to put food on their tables. And after the devastating Lahaina wildfires, as federal aid has dried up, demand has surged by over 65%. These families aren't lazy. They're not looking for handouts. They're not liars or cheaters looking to defraud the government. They are survivors of fires, of economic hardship, of systems that too often overlook them. They're hardworking, honest Americans trying to get back on their feet. What they need is not less help. They need more. In my district alone, SNAP serves over 28,000 households, 1 in 8 families. Over half of them include children, seniors, or someone living with a disability. This bill would cut tens of millions of dollars from Hawaii's SNAP benefit. And that's not just a line item on a budget. That's a child going to bed hungry. That's a grandma or grandpa choosing between their medication or meals. That's a working mom skipping dinner so her kids can eat. As a mother, it breaks my heart, and I can't even imagine voting for legislation that would rip food from the mouths of our children. And as a lawmaker, I cannot justify passing a bill that decimates local economies under the false flag of fiscal responsibility. We know that nutrition and farm policy move together or not at all. Yes, we need to renew key programs that help farmers stay afloat in the face of disasters, climate change, and global insecurity. But we can't do that by sacrificing the food security of millions of Americans. That's not leadership. That's cruelty. And we are better than this. My colleagues, I know you are all here because you care deeply about your communities. I do too. And I still believe we can find common ground on a bipartisan farm bill that meets this moment. But that starts now by rejecting these callous cuts to SNAP and reminding us all who we serve, not any one single administration, but the people. It starts by standing up for our farmers and our families, for food producers and our children, for a system that works for all of us, not just the wealthy few. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. I yield back. Mr. Speaker, I rise today with a warning, no, a plea. Rural America is already in crisis. People there die younger, mothers face greater risks giving birth, and hospitals teeter on the edge of collapse. Medicaid is the thin lifeline that fragile systems are using to hold itself together. Cut it, and people will die. At Adventist Health Castle in Kailua, 75% of patients rely on Medicaid and Medicare. They've weathered already the storm of COVID, but with new GOP-led cuts to provider fees, they may be forced to shut down essential services, obstetrics, pediatrics, emergency services, care that literally keeps babies and people alive. But this is not just about one hospital in Hawaii. This is a national crisis. Rural Americans face significantly worse health outcomes and health disparities. In too many rural counties, life expectancy is a decade shorter than that of their urban neighbors. Maternal mortality in rural areas is nearly double that of urban areas, and more than 200 rural hospitals have closed their doors since 2005. and over 450 more are currently at risk of shutting their doors. This isn't hypothetical. It's happening right now. And let's be clear, when these providers and hospitals close their doors, everyone in those communities, including, by the way, some members of Congress and their families, will lose their health care. And it won't bring me or anyone impacted any comfort or peace to say, I told you so. Suma Metla, a pediatric physical therapist and mom, treats kids with complex needs. 40% of her patients are on Medicaid. She told me plainly as she sat in my office today with her 1-year-old Kashi, if these cuts pass, we will not survive past this year. Already, speech therapists and other specialists are shutting their doors in Hawaii and across the country. Her own practice is buried in a 2-week backlog, and one of 2 hospitals that offer similar care, and we only have 2 throughout the state, has a 100-child waiting list right now. Suma has traveled to Lanai to treat children no one else could reach. She tried to keep care going through telehealth, but when Congress let those tools expire, families were left stranded. Or let's talk about the preschool teacher in my district whose son was born weighing less than 2 pounds. 5 months in the NICU, emergency surgeries, feeding tubes, a hospital bill 50 times more than she will make in a single year, covered by Medicaid. That little boy is now 3 years old, full of life and laughter and love, obsessed with music and trucks. He is only alive because Medicaid was there. We cannot forget, my friends, what is at stake. These are not just numbers on a page. They're real lives, real children, real families, and real communities. People like you and me. Slashing Medicaid won't balance the budget. It will close hospital doors. It will rip care from those who need it most. It will end lives. We must not let this happen. Find the courage, have a conscience, vote no. I yield back.